Taurus 21. A finger pointing at an open book. Very often, if we're seeking guidance, we might take a certain type of book, like the I Ching or various things, tarot cards, something like that. And we would consult the oracle. And putting a finger in an open book is the same thing. We might be given a phrase or a clue or an explanation that really deeply resonates with us at that moment. And this is very meaningful, of course. However, this has to be balanced with a certain amount of common sense, rational analysis. Because if it isn't, then we just become slaves to an aspect of ourselves which is not trustworthy. The same can be extended to apply to any teaching at all. If you think about how many spiritual teachings there have been in the history of the world, it's huge. And they say different things, don't they? Some say there is heaven and hell and life after death and so on and so forth. Some say there is not. Some say that this is right and that's wrong and the other way around. And they do say different things. And all of the philosophers tend to kind of disagree, really. Even scientists disagree about the nature of reality. It is not the case that we are told by some ultimate knowledge, like God, what is the case. This is the truth. That's what we must do. That's the facts of the matter. There you go. That's not available to us. We're having to work it out for ourselves. That's the nature of life. And there's a reason for that. And that may not be explainable within this degree. What this degree teaches us is that we must be able to balance the information or guidance or whatever we receive from another source with our own inner awareness, our own intuition. And that process is really important and little done. On the one hand, one might notice that not that many people seek the guidance that they need on how to live. And of those who do seek that, they become religious. They become completely sort of certain that the dogma of their religion is truth. So you've got two approaches there, neither of which works. You can't just ignore guidance, and you can't just accept guidance. They're both wrong. What we need to do is to take information, take guidance, take advice, take opinions, and just check out whether that feels okay. And just notice that. There's a flush that happens to me, that I get a tingling electrical energy somehow in my being when somebody says something that's right. And when somebody says something that's a bit iffy, I also get a flinch almost, like, My body tells me what to do with information given. Now, whether I actually care to look at my body, to feel what actually is my response to input, whether I do that or not, is very important. What this degree, Taurus 21, is telling us is that, yes, really, you must. You have to. In today's world, we are told so many lies, so many lies, not only by marketing executives and politicians, but by lovers, by family members, even friends. That's the nature of reality. So we have to do something about that, and we have to learn not to take guidance at face value, but to check it out. Now, the process to go through to check it out is not as simple as just noticing your feelings, because your feelings can tell lies too. How often do we trust our intuition only to find that it actually lets us down? You know, we do things spontaneously and then we realize we've made a mistake. That does happen. We cannot simply trust our intuition, because the intuition isn't always the wisdom in the matter. Sometimes analytical thought is. Sometimes we make up rules for living, philosophies that we live by, and that's what we need to hold on to, despite intuitively wanting to do differently. So neither is necessarily better than the other, but if you use both and somehow get a deeper sense of yourself, of the wisdom itself, of the situation that you're applying to, some teachings, absolutely fine most of the time, are indeed wrong at different times. I don't think there's any universal teaching at all that might not be found to have an exception. Now, the process to go through is first of all, be clear what it is you're considering. Somebody might say, astrology works. Astrology, I believe in astrology. Well, what do they mean? They believe that astrology works for everyone, can be made to work, has some truth in it. Actually, what's the statement? Most of the, as an astrologer, I've come across people so often that tell me, rather rudely I feel, that astrology is nonsense, it doesn't work. And I say, what do you think astrology is? And they tell me something which, that's not astrology. That's what people do to make money out of astrology, but it's not astrology. So first of all, check out what it is you're being told. Mostly you will find that that's different from what you thought was the case before the analysis. So be very clear what it is you're considering, and then consider other points of view. And then notice how you feel, which is your preference. And just look at the implications of what happens if you feel that. If you believe in astrology, then this. If you don't, then that. And if you're confused about that, that's because you're confused about the first question, probably. Then make up your mind about which path you prefer. Do you prefer to live in a world where astrology is okay, is believable, or not? That's your life path chosen. And what does your conscience tell you? Does your conscience tell you it's right just to dismiss something that you know nothing about? Is that going to keep you in clear conscience? It wouldn't me. If somebody, I was invited once to a soiree, it was called, a supper evening, by this rather provocative Gemini woman who wanted to get together all her interesting friends and see what happened. And so she brought me, and she brought this other guy who was, what did he call himself? A Satanist. And I was very surprised that she wanted us to talk to each other. But we were very respectful and courteous to each other. And at the end of the evening, he presented his case so well that I couldn't find anything wrong with what he said. I particularly don't want to be a Satanist, but he didn't seem to be a bad person to me. He seemed to have the same level of sensitivity and respect that I would hope for in any of my associates. I think he used the word Satanist just to provoke people who were prejudiced to reveal themselves. And actually, his expression of what was meant by Satanism conformed very, very closely to my understanding of what Sufism is, actually. You see the point? The point is, you get information and it's not fully explained to you. And it's coming from somebody with an agenda. And it's coming from a language that may not be yours, or the source material would have been from a different language. Like, for example, the Christian Bible is written in vernacular words like English and German and so on. But it wasn't delivered in those vernacular languages. It was delivered in a mantric language, Aramaic, probably the oral tradition of Jesus. And then it was written down in another mantric language, Hebrew, before it was translated. However can that be the real message, you know? We have to check out what we're told against our feelings and go through a process of decision, choice in the end. What do I choose to believe? The final understanding is that there is no reality that can conform exactly to yours. No two people share the same sense of reality. We don't live in the same world as someone else. It looks like it really does. It confuses the hell out of us. And yet, that's the truth. We all create our own illusions, and none of them are exactly the same as somebody else's. So how can you take on somebody else's wisdom if your reality is different from theirs? You can't. You shouldn't. That turns you into a slave of the mind. You have to work it out for yourself. Now, for some that's frightening. For others that's a joyful freedom. Make it up. Create your own story. There's no great penalty if you get it wrong. The only penalty that we have for making up the wrong story is that we take a more circuitous route to get back to God. That's my opinion.